Hey, this is Mike Lindsay from Vinyl MX, and here we are. We are at part 3 of the Haiden Deegan bike claim story from the 2022 Loretta Lynn's National. As we stated when we set out with this feature, it would likely be 3 parts. At least these 3 parts are what we consider the core of the story. There is a chance we might end up doing a little bit more follow-up on this if further stories come forward, if any of the interviewees counterclaim or anything really comes up of that nature. But the 3 parts here are kind of the meat and the potatoes of what we really see that happened and of the main interviews that we were able to accomplish. This video is the shortest in the group. Kind of weird how that balanced out our initial interviews, of course, with like Tim Cotter, Brennan Schofield himself, and Mark Burkeen. There was a lot to unpack there, so that's quite a long feature. I really implore, if you haven't watched all the way through too, there's a lot of little interesting tidbits in there that really expand upon and clear things up in some sense. Part 2, of course, was Matt Walker and Donnie Luce as their timelines directly fit. And if you listen to part 2, you would have heard Brennan Schofield's sponsor mentioned multiple times, a man by the name of Chris, who is a Yamaha dealer out of Canada. We have spoken to him. The man has his own right to privacy, of course, and we really respect his reasoning for not wanting to go directly on a Zoom call or anything of that nature with us. He did feel strongly about just kind of covering over a couple topics and giving us a statement to clear up what he feels like are some misgivings in the initial story in relation to his dealership and the claimed threats by Yamaha Motor or Yamaha Canada. So we have a statement from him for that. Other than that, he just sort of cleared up with us, some of the situation that Matt Walker and Donnie Luce mentioned about the timelines of when he wasn't involved, and he pretty much matched up to everything that they said was true. After that, you will see a short statement from Bobby Reagan that we spoke to Bobby about. He is the only member of the Monster Energy Star Yamaha racing team. He is the owner that will be speaking to us on this matter. That's what we were told, is that pretty much the communication will be from Bobby. So we won't be able to get any further interviews with anyone else from the team that may have been on site or around this situation. We were able to get Brian Deegan's statement for the part 1 of this feature. However, due to this communication bit with Monster Energy Star Yamaha, that's why basically I'm the one that had to repeat what Brian kind of shared with us, but we weren't able to get him on a Zoom call for those reasons. So we're going to jump into it with the statement from Chris. Let's see here. The statement reads, "No one from Yamaha Canada, Yamaha USA, or any Yamaha affiliates has contacted me in the weeks up to, during, or after Loretta's in regards to our Yamaha franchise. Sincerely, Chris." So as we stated, there was an initial claim in an interview that the Yamaha dealer that supports Brennan Schofield was threatened. Since this, if you go back and look at the interview we did with Brennan, we cleared up that seemed to be more of an assumption, that he actually had not been told that. In conversations officially on record, interview with Donnie Luce, he also mentions that he did not even meet the dealer or the representative or owner until that meeting all went down at Loretta's while they're all under the same tent. Chris confirmed that was the first time he had ever met Luce. He also confirmed that his involvement only began when he messaged Matt Walker, not the other way around. He was not approached and drug into it. It was his decision. And that ultimately, as Matt Walker and Donnie Luce say in their interviews, there was a time or moment where Chris spoke to Brennan's father. And after that conversation, that is when they decided to go and repeal the claim on the motorcycle. So again, this is just them clearing up the situation that nobody from Yamaha corporate or anything of that means was in it. As we said when we got into this feature initially, we figured that, yes, things can easily get miscommunicated and strung out in stories with this many people involved. We don't know if really at the end of this, if anybody will have a super defined truth of what they believe that happened. But a large one we wanted to uncover here is, was there any level of massive corporate involvement? Was there any massive leverage placed against somebody from that big of a level? And everything we have from this really points to no, from Brennan's own clearing up of the story to Matt Walker and Donnie Luce's involvement, to what the AMA and MX Sports have told us, and now the dealer themselves, that we really don't have any proof or any statement that points towards Yamaha's involvement at that level. Definitely in Donnie Luce's interview, you can hear that he was trying to resolve the situation, but as we spoke to Matt Burkeen at the level, Matt Burkeen from the AMA, that at the level that Donnie was speaking to him, there's nothing really that's against the rule books at the way that they were talking and at the conversation they had. Again, there was no leverage placed against the dealer in any shape or form. And then we'll go ahead and let the audio play now from our conversation with Bobby Reagan.
First question. Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. I am currently speaking with Bobby Reagan, the, of course, team principal owner of the Monster Energy Star Yamaha Racing operation. Thank you for your time, Bobby. We are basically just kind of covering through what happened with this bike claim situation. As I've done with everybody we've interviewed, I'd love to hear your timeline of where you saw this happen or what your involvement was. So my first question would be, at what point were you notified that there was a bike claim?
Well, let me clarify. Where I was at Loretta's for 2 days, and I left on Wednesday afternoon. And I did have one other senior manager there, Brad Hoffman, who left on Thursday. So whenever they filed a claim for the bike, I was notified that evening. And of course, immediately called Brad, who's the other senior manager, and we discussed it. And the only thing we were really concerned about was the integrity of the motor that was in that bike had some identifying marks on some of the parts where they were made, and that's something that we work very hard to keep in-house. It's not anybody's business where we buy our stuff from, and we were concerned about that. Other than that, we had no concern at all. So it was just obvious that I mean, we knew about the claiming rule. It hadn't been claimed one for a few years. We weren't that worried about it, but we were aware, so it was a gone bike. It was gone. That night I went to bed thinking it was gone. I woke up the next morning and called, and it was back. So there were no calls made to anybody other than to Brad and to Jensen. And the only reason I talked to Jensen was to get the full details on exactly how it happened. Other than that, I mean, real simple. We and as far as I know, and let me clarify what I'm saying. This is to the best of my knowledge. I had no conversation. Well, it's not to the best of my knowledge that I didn't have any conversations with anybody, but with Brad and with Jensen, and that was it. Nobody else.
So no one from MX Sports, AMA, Yamaha Motor USA beyond your two staff members about this situation?
Nobody. We thought we had lost the motorcycle, and I didn't know until the next day that we hadn't. So it was that is absolutely the truth, and and this also includes why we were concerned about losing it. We weren't concerned about some kind of part in there that nobody heard of before, because there's not one in that bike. And the pro bike, maybe so, but in that bike, that was an amateur bike, and it was, but it did have some of the stuff that we run on the pro side, and that had identifying marks on some of the parts in there that we didn't want to get out.
So now with that situation having arisen, as you guys said, you are aware of the claim rule. Does this in any way going forward make you guys reevaluate, what is brought to an amateur race, what the amateur spec bike looks like? Does this change your guys' thought or pathway with any of this?
Yes, it will have. on the parts that we cannot change. Some of them might be moving parts that if we grind a seal off or whatever might be on there, it could affect the way the bike runs. So, yes, it will have something to do with how we build an amateur bike in the future.
Okay. At any point, was anyone trying to, even though you didn't contact, were you being reached out to by any of the other parties involved in this? Did anyone try to contact you to somehow change how this was going or anything of that nature that you were aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm sure they didn't because I stay up late and I got no call.
Okay. Well, really, since, your presence from the timeline-wise, you weren't at the track, it really kind of ends the major questions I had for you. The only thing else I would ask is, do you have any thoughts or anything that you feel like that needs to be addressed from your team side, from your staff side, that you would like to address on what's been kind of put out there or what you've heard so far?
Well, sure. I want to, I hope the kid that was going to claim the bike, I understand the bike. From what I understand, DeFrancisco is trying to sell his bike for $42,000 right now. To spend $17,000 and to get a $50,000 bike is pretty good deal. And I would assume that would be the main reason for trying to claim the bike, to make some money with it. But I don't know that, but I understand. Also, along with that, I would also assume that maybe that the Davy Coombs organization and AMA, whoever makes the rule, would maybe update the values. If you claim just a normal guy out there on the line, and in those in the B class or in the pro class, they're probably going to have $30,000 to $40,000 in their motorcycle. It's expensive to do what we all do. So the rule needs to be updated to reflect current conditions.
Mm-hmm. Amateur. So my last question for you guys would be on the spec of the bike. So there has been a lot of questions, of course, pointed towards the condition of the bike that Deegan rode, where it kind of falls in terms of things. So for you guys, by your official claim, that is still what you would consider an amateur spec motorcycle, which I guess I will clear up in the question. In saying that, is quite often that an amateur and a pro bike under a similar program can share components, but that is still what you guys would consider an amateur spec engine and amateur spec bike.
Now look, you make sure you get this right, because that is absolutely for sure.
Yep.
He rides he did have a chance to ride the pro bike the week before he went to Loretta's. Didn't like it. Needs more time on it to even get used to it, but it wasn't done for that purpose. We'd let him ride it because there's a chance he might run a pro national race, and we just wanted to see if he liked it, but he didn't like it. So if he does get to run a pro race, he will run an amateur bike there, because he can't ride a pro bike.
Yeah, so the bike that he raced at Loretta's is the same spec bike that he raced at the Pro-Am. At Unadilla, the Pro-Am.
Not Pro-Am, Pro Race.
Pro Race.
There's a chance he might run a pro.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, because he raced Unadilla this last weekend for the Pro-Am points. I believe he was again for Bug Creek.
That was not the same motor. Not the
okay.
same motor. But if he runs a pro race, it will be the same motor. But it is an amateur bike. Our pro bike has stuff that we buy all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we would never let that thing go through the red lens.
Mm-hmm. As you see, the conversation with Bobby was pretty short. He denies any real involvement from his end or Star's end on the grander scale of this, it is a pretty short conversation. Interesting part I took from it is they will reevaluate what level of bikes they're bringing to the race. They still stand to claim that it was an amateur level bike, and as we talked about earlier, there is a lot of shared components there. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we won't truly know what exact bike they brought to the race, but they explained their uncomfortableness of losing it, where their involvement was on seeing if there was, any other way around or any other form of getting through this. And then ultimately, Bobby does mention wanting to see the price increase brought up. From all the conversations we've had so far with MX Sports and AMA staff, we do not foresee that happening. They are very comfortable with the current price of the rule. They think it's much more accessible than raising it, and also would keep large programs in check from maybe bringing bikes of a nature they are not comfortable with losing to these events. We, however, do think that based on our conversation with Burkeen and other officials that there will be some tweaks to the rule, most notably the minor portion. As Burkeen expressed multiple times in his interview, he did not want to stop Brennan Schofield from going through with the claim by asking him to go find his father. In the way they termed it, they actually thought he was not even at the property, because ultimately those guys from the AMA wanted to uphold the rule book and allow this bike claim to go through. There was the danger that basically if they told Brennan to go find him, it's like, hey, Dad's down at the corner. There's not very much phone signal there. If they didn't make it back in that 25-minute window or so they had left, the bike claim would have been off. So I really commend, those guys for following through with it and trying to do the best they can. They do admit in their interviews they would love to be able to go back and change that moment a little bit. And with that, I think you will see an adjustment to the bike claim rule where it will have an addendum that shows a minor must have a parent or legal guardian present when they file the claim. As of right now, that's not on the rule book. So again, what Brennan did was completely legal. As the AMA and as Tim Cotter state over and over, Brennan followed the rules to a T. And ultimately where we've kind of come here at the end of this, listening through to all of it, we haven't really found a large corporate entity or anything of that nature that put the pressure on the way that would have made this claim go away at the end, even through Brennan's own testimony and kind of the people around it. Some decision was made during that meeting that night between Matt Walker, Don Luce, Derek Harris, Brennan, his father, and ultimately sponsor, is the time at which the decision was made to drop the claim. And ultimately, from what we can tell, that's at some point in there is where the decision lies that changed the path of this story and ultimately led to Brennan not leaving with that motorcycle. So like I said, we feel like there's a lot to unpack between all these. Check them all out. We'd love to hear your synopsis in the comments section if you did listen to all of the testimony, all the interviews, where you think this landed. If you think anybody's really truly at fault, if it's a giant misunderstanding, what you guys would maybe like to see happen with the rule book in the future. Again, I know there's going to be some upcoming discussions on how the claiming rule is brought into effect, and I think there's some positive that will come of this. I'm really stoked on one end that somebody basically did this. One of the biggest things I will say is there's always been a sort of unspoken rule that people thought if a claim was put on that everybody else would, throw a counterclaim in all the other OEMs. That didn't happen. This basically went through with only Brennan's claim against the bike. And again, I hope that from this situation that things change a little bit in amateur racing and that maybe we see a little bit more of an even playing field going forward.